here is that we know that environmental polluters will destroy everything that they can, everything in their wake. So I think we have a common cause in stopping that and using the collective power that people have to give a voice to those concerns. So my question to you is, if through the Pivot Center, we wanted to reach out to you as Hamilton Naturalist Club, current members, brand new members, family supporters of people who brought cookies and would tell tales about cicadas, whoever is here, how do we do that? How do we mobilize all the people in this room who hopefully care as much about other people and other parts of the land as you do your sort of wherever your current focus is? I looked at the HNC website and I saw that there's a section called Action Alerts. And I also saw that there was a section, I don't remember what else it was called. So I think it linked me back to another, I think it was environmental work or something like that. And it kind of linked me back to something else. But my question for everybody here, and maybe this is a question maybe more specifically for Jen or for Brian, if we sent you, if we at the Pivot Center sent you an action alert and said, there's a facility in a neighborhood somewhere in Hamilton that is doing work that is destructive, that is detrimental to the land, to the air, to the water, would you respond? Would you write a letter? Would you take a few minutes out of your time to send an email? That's really the question, and that's the call in. And what we're looking for as a start, as we start to reach out to organizations that are maybe not as directly involved in this kind of environmental justice work, is just for that. It's for that kind of support. We can provide lots of resources, we can give you details, we can even give you a template. But that's really the question we wanted to pose.
So we can certainly work on that. I'm just concerned about our speaker.
Okay, great.
Yeah, but certainly.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you, Jessica and Carrie, for inviting us to that important conversation. And stay tuned. We'll talk to the board about it and get back to you. So now I'm super excited. And this week I'm going to be eating a cookie in a second. But to invite Trudy, Sherwin, and Laura to talk to us about their road trip, and they will be able to talk about it way better than I can. We just have to switch technology here. I was wondering how long it would take for you to come up here before and I mean, they have cookies and shirts, like this, they also
the shirts say, what some may find loud and annoying, others find beautiful. That's decided my board
Laura loves these shirts. Also, yeah. And also the
Okay, who's your at? Okay, thank you. So thank you so much for having us. Yeah, we're super excited to be here. We'll go to the big picture of the cicada first, and I'll introduce myself. I'm Trudy. Got it this way? There you go. And I am a biologist from training and work.
Yeah, and I'm Sherwin Watson-Leung. I work at Valley Conservation as an aquatic ecologist.
And I'm Laura McCartney, their super nature nerdy friend that they asked to come on the trip with.
So, first thing I want to ask is how many people here have, by show of hands, heard a cicada calling before? Pretty much everybody. How many have seen a cicada in person? Oh, that's good, lots of people. How many have seen periodical cicadas? There's like a few, okay. In Ontario, periodical cicadas are extremely rare, but they do sometimes make it this far north. Ontario has 4 genera of cicadas, and 10 species. And the dog-day cicada is the one that most people will be familiar with. It's the most common. There are grape cicadas and black and orange cicadas as well. And like I said, the periodical cicadas are very rare. So annual cicadas, which is what the dog-day cicada is, spend approximately 2 years underground as larvae, and they emerge. When they emerge every year, you'll hear them to mate. But what you can see is the difference between a periodical cicada and a dog day or an annual cicada. It's pretty dramatic, and it has a lot to do with, you'll see how muted and camouflaged the annual cicada is on the left compared to the periodical cicada, which is super bright, big red eyes. Also, periodical cicadas are slower, easier to catch, and part of that has to do with their life history and the fact that they emerge en masse by the thousands and millions. There is only, that's actually needs to be corrected, 7 of the roughly 3,400 cicada species are periodical cicadas, so they're pretty rare. It's really actually quite interesting that all of the periodical cicadas, from what I've seen in the research, although I had one contradictory piece of evidence, with all of them are in eastern North America. There are 7 different species of Magis cicada, which is the genus, and they occur in 2 different life cycles, 13-year and 17-year. And they emerge in groups called broods. And broods are really more of a bookkeeping type of thing. They are a way of identifying the groups that all emerge in the same geographical area on a common schedule. So, and the evolutionary history is that there are 3 groupings, the Decula, Cassini, and Decim organisms, or groupings, I guess is the word I'm going to use, that emerged from a common ancestor at 3 different time periods. Now, what's fascinating is that within each of these groupings, there is a 13-year species and a 17-year species. The Decim group has 2 13-year species, but in general, there seem to be these pairings of common ancestor, but that each independently evolved to have this longer life cycle, or different life cycles. So they were independent evolutionary events where they separated by time to emergence and then ended up being different species. So this is really hard to read, so don't worry too much about it, but what it shows on the left is all of the different groups. So there's the 17-year grouping and the 13-year grouping. So remember that brood has to do with if they emerge in the same geographical area at the same time. And in 2024, there was this really exciting overlap where you had the 17-year Northern Illinois brood, which is brood, just to get confusing, brood 13, at the same time as the 13-year brood 19. This is showing that 2024 in Illinois, they were going to overlap. So that was why this was such an exciting year. This is another way to sort of visualize all of the different broods and their emergence overlap, and sort of see how they stagger themselves. So 2024 was special. It was the first time since 2015 that a 13-year species emerged in the same year as a 17-year species, or 17-year brood. And it was the first time since 1998 that you had a 13 and a 17-year brood that were adjacent to each other emerging in the same year. And it was the first time since 1803 that brood 13 and 19 emerged in the same year, and that won't happen again until 2245. And it was possible to see all 7 named periodical cicada species and their adults in the same year, and that won't happen again until 2037. So I'm gonna pass it to Sherwin now, because he was our master trip planner.
Yeah, so earlier, like at the beginning of the year, I think we saw on social media about this special year that was occurring, and Trudy looked at me and said, we're going to that. And of course, we also thought of our friend Laura, who we would love to come with us. So I had the job of trying to figure out how are we going to figure this out. So in charge of the general trip planning, figuring out where we were going and how we could optimize where we were going to see these cicadas. So started with this kind of map that mapped out where the different groups emerge. This is one of all the different groups. So the ones in the circle, there's the brown and the blue, and those were the 2 groups that were emerging. And then when you zoom in on that, there's this little, it's kind of like the hatched area that shows where the overlapping areas were. So I use this map to figure out where we're going to maximize, where we can see this small area where these different insects that were emerging in the millions were going to be maximized and see altered. So that took us eventually having like multiple map windows open and trying to figure things out. Took us to Springfield, Illinois. I never heard of it. And it's Springfield, yeah. So we basically planned our trip around that. Our trip, of course, we had to break it up. It was a good 11-hour drive there. So we ended up like doing a stop along the just northeast of Chicago. And that happened to coincide with the northern limit of emergence for that northern group. And that was, sorry. Oh, there we go, sorry. And then we made our way down to closer to Springfield and did our day trip there at Springfield, just what's the town group? Bloomington, Illinois. So the other thing that I used was there's a really neat crowdsourcing app that was developed by researchers. I can't quite read which university or whatever. St. Joseph's University. They developed this app for smartphones to crowdsource emergences. And the app essentially, you take a photo with it, and if you document or if you see the cicada. So now they can get hundreds of thousands of photos sent to them, and your phone maps it, and they verify every photo, and they kind of made it into their contests where you can have leaderboards and that sort of thing. So just as a quick, like here's the. Let's see if it actually starts here. Oh, it is running. It's not running on the screen. So, just a tour of the app, right? It gives you all sorts of info on, maps, ID guides, species guides, that sort of thing, all at your fingertips. And then the neat feature is the mapping feature, which will come up in a second. And you could see every photo that's on this tape and verified. So as it zooms in, this is how we narrow down, like, okay, we're in Springfield, where do we go now? We're driving around the town trying to look for the best emergence. So this was one of the ways that we helped narrow down, instead of just driving around aimlessly or walking around different parts. So, and this was where we found the big congregation. Yeah, it just keeps going and going, right? So, yeah. And this is just examples of some of the other stuff. So here's some of the photos we took, and then that it got verified and it got on the leaderboard. I was, of course, we were close to Union B with 6,400 records. Yeah. And then the other thing we utilized was just like Facebook groups, and we joined this one called Cicada 2024. So it had everything from enthusiasts who were really excited to people who lived in the areas who were really grossed out and were writing, how do I get rid of these monsters? Yeah, so just people posting there, again, like people were saying, come to Lincoln Memorial. This is where like, all the activity is. So that's different ways that we really narrowed down like where to go just as we're driving. And we found one.
How are you enjoying the concert? It's 2 hours long.
And you could see there were so many of them there, like I'm brushing them off me. Right? You couldn't go like a minute without 2 or 3 landing on it. Yeah, it's really. Yeah, I'll hand it back to Trudy.
Yeah, so I'm gonna give a little bit of a background on the biology and ecology of these organisms, and I will fully admit that I did not do the research ahead of time. So this has been fascinating to learn as I'm preparing for this presentation. A lot of stuff I wish I knew at the time, but they're fascinating organisms. So the cicada will start to emerge from its burrow when the soil temperature reaches around 64 degrees Fahrenheit. It spends, it does about 4 molts in the ground, and then does a 5th molt and emerges, and it's quite pale and soft, and then it has to harden. And then once it's hardened, it starts calling, using these, and I'll talk a little bit more later about the calling mechanisms. And here's my concern about this this video may not work. And then they find their mate. Oh, it's not connected, I think I messed it up, didn't I? I did. Now it's disconnected from the thing again. So, oh wait, from current slide. Did it work now? Sorry. There's one video that didn't work. So we'll go from here. No, because it's not to the roast. Oh, we should test that out. No. Okay, thank you. So you can see, like we caught on video, them actually mating. And then the female, I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to do this now. Okay, well, basically the female uses her ovipositor, which is fascinating. They've actually determined that the female cicada ovipositor has metal particles. It's reinforced with metal particles. It's like a saw. And they inject about, I think 60 eggs in the twig, usually a young twig. So they don't do damage to older trees, but they might do damage to younger trees. And I think each female cicada can lay about 600 eggs total. And then the larvae, after about 6 weeks, emerge and fall down to the ground. By then, all of the adults are dead, and then they make their burrows, which I'm not going to touch the screen to show the video for that. Yeah. So like Sherwin said, we got to the location. On the first stop we made was in that sort of brown area, which was Indiana Dunes area, and that area we know is only brood 13 or the 17-year species. But what was interesting is because it was further north, so therefore the temperature a little bit cooler, we got to see a lot of the earlier stages of development. So you can see on the left, there's sort of an image of the nymph and all of its stages as it's hatching out of its case for its last molt. And you can see the different pictures we captured, the one on the top right being the not yet hardened emerged adults, and then on the bottom is the case of an already emerged older or nymph, sorry, last stage, and then on the bottom left is one bursting out of its shell. So, but as you can imagine, identification of when you've got so many overlapping species is a real challenge. And at the time, I remember thinking, I know there's 7 species, and thinking I could just look at them and maybe be able to tell. But they're very complicated that way. But what we can, now that I'm in retrospect learning about this, you can know that because this was a 17-year species only, so therefore there's 3 species to pick from. And in this picture, you can see the abdomen of the one adult being very red, and only those decim groups, cicadas, adults have red abdomen, therefore, I can say that was septa and decim. So, you know, it's a fascinating thing when you're used as a biologist sort of IDing species, but not really knowing all this complicated stuff. But when we were there, we didn't have the best weather, and we probably shouldn't have been out, but we were so excited. We decided, you know, we just couldn't be kept away. So I love how he stops too, or she, I don't know. They just stop when the thunder comes. So then we drove from there, like Sherwin said, to Bloomington. And we stayed in Bloomington, and then the next day went to Springfield, and knowing that there was going to be these massive numbers, we did do a hike in the morning and didn't really find any, and it was really fascinating talking to the people that we met on the hike, you know, and they kind of, we're here to see the cicadas, you know, we live here and we're so gross But then you can also see them gain some appreciation as you talk to them, and they could see that this, well, okay, maybe there's something cool here, because these people go all this way. But in this case, we were starting to get to the point where we were overlapping the 2 groups, and we were seeing the numbers. So we were super excited to see this density. And one of the things about cicadas is sometimes you can have upwards of more than 1.5 million individuals per acre, or greater than 370 per meter squared. It's quite a massive number. And so the strategy for this is to think predator satiation. You all emerge at once, and there's no way the predators can eat them all. And I know that I've heard stories about people who live there who are really annoyed about their dogs just freaking out and eating them all in the first couple of days, and they're worried about it. But then by day 2 or 3, they're crawling out of the dog, and the dog's like, I'm so done with this. Well, so I think it's very similar for a lot of other species. So this is some video of as they're, so again, we're later in the development stage because we're a little further south. And this is they're all making their way up the tree after they've emerged, either maybe to find mates or to lay their eggs. And this is pretty. Oh, actually, maybe what I'll do as well, this can be passed around. We did bring back some wings.
So not the snacks.
One case, or one nipple casing.
They're not chips.
They're not chips. not snacks, no cookies. So we had, you know, there's so many questions, not just for me, but for even the ecologists that still study these organisms. For example, why prime intervals? How is it that they evolved to emerge at 13 years and 17 years, and why did they pick those numbers? So there's some theories floating around out there. One theory is predator avoidance, where if you think about the top figures kind of showing what happens when you have a peak in a predator population, your prey population goes down and they stagger, so that you end up with boom or bust is kind of the ecological theory. But mathematically, what I'm not sure I fully understand or grasp this concept because it's just complicated. But what they've seen is that, so in that bottom image, you've got P2 is a predator that has a 2-year life cycle, P3 a predator that has a 3-year life cycle. And they're showing the upwards of predators with 9-year life cycles that they will, and I'm thinking what the identifier of the P is when they're at they're mature and they're gonna maybe have the older individuals are going to be more likely to be able to eat more. So that's their peak or their oldest age. And you can see that just mathematically, 13 and 17 have this window of time where there is no overlap. So that's one theory. The other theory is hybridization prevention, and it has to do with the glaciation being a very harsh time period and the evolution of a life cycle that hides under the ground during these harsh conditions was really desirable. It could make it through, and the organisms that that kind of emerged off cycle were picked off or didn't survive, and preventing hybridization between organisms with a different life cycle was a method of success. And there is modeling that's been done that shows that these intermediate life cycles extinguish each other so that only long prime numbered cycles, that's math. But basically, I was very happy to see that I'm not alone in that none of this really made a lot of sense to me. Because, I mean, the fact that, there is a lot of insect species and a lot of species that dealt with glaciation. There's all the species deal with predators. So still, there's some sort of question of, this is a really unusual life strategy. It's really unique and cool. And we're not 100% sure. And it's very difficult to study, of course, because of the long life cycles. So we still don't really know. So for all of the young people in the room who may have a career that they could dedicate to this, the questions please. So really cool stuff that has been answered is how do they tell time? So the nymphs suck on tree xylem or tree roots of the xylem, and in the spring, trees xylem gets a much higher amino acid content. And what they've figured out by bringing in potted plants to the lab that have cicada larvae sucking on the roots, that if they trick the tree into budding twice in 1 year, the cicadas emerge a year early. So they basically are counting the spring elixir to help count their number of years. And then how are they so noisy? So some examples of what we were hearing when we were there. What we were seeing. It was really interesting. There was a gentleman there that Laura's going to introduce us to later that showed me these tympanum on the body of a male. Hopefully this will work. So basically the abdomen's completely hollow, and they basically use muscles to pulse these drum-like things back and forth, and that's how they make this sound. So they're not as loud as a blender, not as loud as a fire alarm, or sorry, louder, the first two are louder, and then they're not as loud as a siren. And their dangerous audio level is about 85 decibels, and they're at about 100. This is kind of fun. We do know they make alarm sounds when handled. Oh wow! You didn't like that. And now what I found fascinating with this is, so remember back to the three different groupings, evolutionary groupings, and how you had subsequent evolution of 13 years cicada and 17 years in those two groupings. When you listen to the sounds, I'm scared what's going to happen when I do this. Because I have to, can I do it on here? I don't know if I can. But is it playing all of them at once? I don't know which one it's playing. Okay, let's assume that was the top one. Yeah, that's an unfortunate thing. Okay, no, we don't want to mess that up. Basically, when you play the tredisum and the septendism, or the two, they sound almost identical. And when you think about that, they have the same evolutionary ancestor, and they're never going to overlap. So that makes sense that they would sound similar. Similar for the Trecadesi and the Trecacini and the Cassini, they sound very similar. And what they have found too is that if you have a year where there is a slight overlap, they will alter their pitch just slightly. So the call is the same, but the ones that are in the overlap area will alter their pitch. So and then it gets even more complicated. Like we thought we would be able to go there and be able to hear all the different species and go, oh, there's that one and there's that one. And they have multiple calls of each species. And then when you're dealing with this situation where it's 7 species overlap, there's no way. It was just a cacophony. So yeah, and the females don't call, but they flick, they do a tongue flick. So I think we captured this, where that's the female doing its flick and the males are getting attracted to her. I did read that you could kind of trick the male into calling or coming to you by snapping their fingers to mimic the flicking thing that the female does. It didn't work for me, but yeah, so like there's a video of success, dating success. So, and then just a little bit of cicadas and the services that they provide. Of course, the sudden appearance is a feast, and it leads to a boost in overall productivity and all the species involved. They make extensive tunnel networks to aerate the soil, and they improve the soil structure and the ability to retain moisture and reduce erosion. And then that leads, and they get nutrients from decaying adults that support plant growth. So, oh, I've got a video, yes, okay. That was captured by somebody on Facebook of the squirrel mowing down. I mean, there is some really interesting studies that have been done post-emergence like this about how the trophic structure in forest systems actually is quite disrupted by these mass emergences. And now Laura's going to talk to us about cicadas and people.
Okay, so how people feel about cicadas seems to be a little bit of a Cicadapocalypse and a Cicadapolooza type of vibe. I'll talk a bit about both sides. Maybe we'll start with the Cicadapocalypse side and why people seem to dislike them. Some people find cicadas to be extremely annoying and to be nothing more than pests. The number of them can be really overwhelming. They can cover entire buildings, entire cars, entire walkways. So they can be completely messy. Cicadas are very loud insects, actually. They get the Guinness Book of World Records for the loudest, being the African cicada of 107 decibels from 20 inches away. Sensory sensitive people can find them very overwhelming with their loudness as well. And also kind of just a lack of control. People sort of like to control their environments, but when you're getting a cicada emergence, you're not controlling that. A fear of insects is called entomophobia. It's a real fear. Top 3 fears are public speaking, fear of heights, and fear of insects. So we've accomplished 2. Cicadas also have been misidentified from earliest settlers coming in and thinking that they're confusing them with locusts and that they wipe out entire crops and ruin nature. And people even today think that cicadas also do that. So they're misidentified and viewed as a plague. So when I posted some of our footage from our trip, a friend of mine said that would be literally my worst hell. And I just I couldn't believe he said that, but I guess that's legit for some people. And then a lot of people also ask, how do you kill them? First thing that comes out of some people's mouths. So here is a clip just from a news reel. Do I just press that button?
No, the one on the side. The side.
That one?
No, the other one. Forward one, you're pressing on.
That. Oh, okay, this is in Chicago during the 2024 emergence. And this kind of can just show some of the fear that people have.
It could be a lot of potatoes.
Okay, so those are some reasons people might not like cicadas, but now for the flip side, there are people like us who simply love cicadas. We're the Cicadapolooza people. So cicadas actually don't do much harm to nature at all, not like locusts. They don't bite, they don't bite, they don't sting, they actually don't want to hurt you. Sorry. They're just loud. And they're only adults for 2 to 4 weeks. So that's when the male is singing, and then it's quite after 3 or 4 weeks. So that's not that long. They provide nutrients for the soil, and they also provide nutrients for predators and people who eat them. Yeah, people eat them. Historically, they're a delicacy in Thailand, Congo, ancient Greece, Rome, and China. Here's some recipes that Sherwin discovered on the internet. I don't know if you want to jot it down or ask him later. And maybe your taste buds are, watering. They're a source of protein, actually, and they're used medicinally in China as well. Okay, these are 2 people that we met at the Lincoln Memorial Park who were collecting cicadas. That was their second bag right there. They informed us that they would be going back to where they were staying, pulling the wings out of the cicadas and their legs out and frying them up in butter, and that they have done this before and that they're delicious, high source of protein and a nutty flavor. We did not try them. Cicadas are viewed as a sign of rebirth and transformation. These are some art pieces from a long time ago that you can find in the Smithsonian Museum. They're viewed as a good omen for health and wealth. And they're found also, cicadas can be found in artwork, music, theaters throughout history and present. Also in China, collecting and selling cicadas for food can earn up a profit of $1,400 a month. This is a town in New Zealand called Kiki, and they love cicadas. It was named that by the Maori people, and it means cicada, Kiki. There's a statue in the town square, a cicada motel, and there are 34 species found in New Zealand, and I'm just saying that could be another road trip. I mean, I'd go. Okay, the cicada is the mascot in Provence. It's viewed as a good luck charm. Many cicada-themed art pieces, soaps, fabrics, and can be found at the farmer markets. It's basically a cultural icon there. The folklore is that God sent cicadas to Provence to help the farmers after afternoon siesta to use the cicada as like an alarm clock But instead, the farmers all loved the cicada sound and it would lull them to sleep and then they wouldn't go back to it. So it backfired. Also, people love cicadas like us because they're just pretty awesome. Plain awesome and magical. We met many people on our road trip. 3 different meetings are key for us. We met a food server on where we ate in Kalamazoo, and it turns out that she's also a kindergarten teacher. And after we sort of told her how cool cicadas are and stuff, she decided that she was going to teach her kids or students about cicadas because she had no clue how cool they were. And then I was thinking, that's really great if she does that, because then maybe we wouldn't have children terrified of them, and maybe they would be interested and think they're exciting, and you know, the pre-talk before being exposed. And then we met Robert, who is an entomologist professor from Utah, who met his brother Eddie to the right. And they were so up our alley. They bought themselves concert t-shirts. Wow. Robert, the professor, was just so excited. He shared a poem that he wrote about cicadas with us. And, you know, they were excited to eat the cicadas. So it was really neat to meet them. We enjoyed meeting them. And then lastly, on our way back to Canada, the border crossing guard said, what was the purpose of it? And Trudy was just like, do we say? Like, will they believe us? So Trudy said, oh, we're here to see the cicada emergence. The what? And then pretty much from there, it was a really long discussion. I'm telling you, the car lineup was huge. She didn't ask us what we were bringing home, nothing. It was all about cicadas, which was so interesting seeing her getting so excited. And then she said that she would be taking her 2 daughters as soon as possible to go explore that. So I think that sometimes it's just that people don't know how cool it is, or our enthusiasm made people like want to know about it. And so I just think that that was just part of the trip, and it was awesome. Because, you know, nature actually is really magical, and I really feel like people should be turning their TVs off. Get out of your house, go explore, get on a road trip. When your friends ask, say yes. Now for some fun with cicadas. Trudy found this knapsack. It's the cicada shell knapsack. I want one. You want one? Yeah. Sherwin found some neat artwork made out of cicada shells and cicada sports. We started collecting the shells, and I was collecting all of the cicadas off the ground. I'm like, I want to keep them. And then I had them in a Tupperware, and like the next day I opened it, and I'm like, I can't keep them. They smell so bad. But we thought that was kind of cool that they did that. Oh, here's a costume that Trudy found. Okay. And we were thinking it might be cool to go to a Halloween party and have everybody go as different stages of the life cycle too. Anyway, so this concludes our cicada presentation. And thank you for listening. And I really hope you guys go away being Cicadapolooza fans, and that you go to the next concert.
I have a question. I mean, this implies that cicadas can count to 17. I mean, we count to 10 because we've got 5 fingers. I mean, I believe that some Aboriginal languages don't have numbers above 10. I think the Tasmanian language didn't.
Okay.
How do cicadas count to 17 when they... don't have 17 fingers. I mean, if you're stuck in a hole in the ground, is there any communication between nearby cicadas? You know, is there some pheromone or something which says, "Come, time to go"?
I don't know about the pheromone because they are sort of under the ground. That's a good question. I do know that. So, like I said, they mold 4 times under the ground.
Yeah.
And what they have found is that the stage or the time it takes to get to that 4th mold is highly variable. So you will have some that make it to the 4th mold in, I don't know, 10 years, and then they just stay at that stage, and they wait there until 17. So, and then other ones that, like, so that's fascinating. There's no answer, I don't have any, like I said, this is just such a mystery. And then there was a few articles I came across that kind of got really deep and philosophical, because like we think humans invented that. You know, this is like, wow. So it's really interesting. No, it's true, it's interesting. So I don't know what to say, other than just that they do know they can trick them by making the plant bud. So there's something about the number of times that spring elixir happens that they can count somehow. Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things with global warming, you'll get more of these cycles, and those every 6 years or something like that.
Yeah, they're saying that. So what I didn't get into is sort of how that shift from the 13 and the 17. There's something that happens. They've noticed that they do seem to get offset by 4 years. So sometimes a 17 might come out at 13, or a 13 might come out at 9, and that can either lead to a new brood, or if the stragglers, they call them, that come out off year, they're going to get picked off. They're going to be less likely to see because they're slower, they're brighter, you know. So, but definitely they're coming out earlier because of climate change. So I think it used to be beginning of June, end of May. Now it's getting earlier into the middle of May. And then what that's going to mean for corresponding predators and all that stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm curious about, so they feed on woody plant roots, but is there one or preferred species of trees that they feed on, or?
That's a good question.
That kind of numbers, they must be feeding on everything.
Yeah, that is a good question. I did not I didn't come across that in my research at all, about whether there was any preferred plants. I did read about how nurseries in areas like this will basically not sell or highly discourage people from planting new trees within 2 years before an expected emergence. But that's more to do, well, it's a little bit to do with the nymphs sucking on the roots of a weaker tree, but it's also to do with the egg laying in the branches affecting the plant. But I didn't know anything about preferred species, so it's a good question. Yes. Yeah.
Are they come in these cycles of prime numbers? Are there batches that come out in very high prime numbers? Sorry, 23,
Yeah, like-
27?
13 and 17.
Yeah, like that was what I did see some conflicting information on like I said, they can shift by 4 years sometimes. I can't remember the term they use in ecology. So, but usually it's the 17 shift down to 13 and the 13 shift down to 9. But I don't think it's gone higher than 17. And currently the 7 species that we have are just the 13 and the 17 here. So,
Interested in the predator response. You talked to the dogs, and we
Yeah.
saw that squirrel, but it either by looking at the literature or actually being there and maybe even seeing some kind of a response, it must be a huge response by the predators, and they themselves, their success in the ensuing years must amplify.
yes, yeah, and there was that one study, as I mentioned, that trophic cascade within a certain forest after. Another study that was really interesting where they hypothesized with bird species that they would, I think they saw a reduction in bird species in the year of the cicada emergence, and they hypothesized, is it because they're avoiding them? because it's noisy, or is there other reasons? And they followed the study to find out that they were actually decreased numbers of that, of those, maybe it was a particular species of bird, I'm not sure, but it decreased everywhere, not just where the cicadas were, which might lend credence to that picture with the predator, the prime number of years. I don't know, but definitely, there is a lot of evidence that there's that boom and bust, you know. It's just, I think the thing is, the boom at 17 years is too difficult to take in the long term, because it's not gonna come again for a long time, so, yeah.
Just to clarify, when they are emergent adults, they don't eat or drink anything.
I don't think so, yeah, I was looking at that because they seem to have, you know, a
They
bit
don't have
of a
any.
proboscis, but.
But they did pee on us.
Oh, yeah. And I don't
So they must drink.
Like, I can't remember, but when we were under the trees at that one point, like, they literally are squirting something.
A firefly.
He's blocked it out, yeah.
Fireflies don't.
Yeah, okay. Do you know what it is? It just like a.
They're there to reproduce and die.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, the wings might be forming like dragonflies when they're shedding the moisture through the web. Maybe it's all.
Yeah. Yeah, there were only, what is it, 2 to 4 weeks, so, it's longer than a mayfly or something, that's only up for a couple days, but. I don't think
Are their populations stable, or are there pressures like development that's affecting them?
Yeah, definitely developments that's affecting them, because they, you know, anytime, well, we were talking about this, like in your backyard, you know, they're all in the soil for that long, so you get a disturbance any type of development, in those areas, you know, there goes 15 years of development down the
So
road.
in cave areas and they live under tree,
Yeah,
right? So, yeah.
Yeah.
house-
put in a parking lot,
house-
by cicadas,
Soil compaction.
yeah.
So with all the new technologies that are happening, is somebody tagging some of these larvae that are coming in, because the universities, entomologists are doing it, so you can tag them and then in 17 years to be that.
Yeah, yeah.
Somebody, is anybody doing that?
The University of Connecticut, if you want to look for really good information, I know there was a student that was talking about some really high-tech equipment that he was using to try to track and understand a little more about mapping them now. So I'm not sure.
Well, we know where they are for 13, 17.
That's right.
That part they're not moving around.
It's an easier species because they're pretty much not going anywhere. So, but I can imagine tagging them. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's a good question. They don't fly very far, and once they're in the ground, they're there for 17 years. So I don't know. I think it's really just digging and checking.
And could there be other populations right beside them too? So we do not know. But if you tag them specifically when they emerge, you can find out.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of interesting ways, but there's definitely a lot of good science that's already been done. And then, I think the bigger thing is going to be understanding how is climate change going to affect them. How you're going to. If you saw from one of those graphs, there's already broods that have gone extinct. I think there's about 3 or 4 of the long list of broods that are. And that just has to do with you have too many that are stragglers, and you just sort of become less and less. Yeah.
We didn't show it, we pulled some old newspaper articles, some dating back to like even when, well, we tried to look, yeah, there's all sorts, so they were able to calculate and figure out a lot of these things based on newspaper records. Like dating way back.
Yeah.
And, you know, we started noticing that pattern of the 15 or 17 years in the geographic areas. And we can see they're all, in all those articles, they call them locusts.
And there's records of indigenous people reporting on, to the people that have arrived, the colonizers that we were using, or they knew the cycle back then.
They're pretty prominent in a lot of indigenous communities too, but we weren't able to, that's not our story.
Fit it all in, yeah.
Yeah, it's not our story.
Do they make the same noise all the time, all day long, like, they have periods when they kind of seem to be quiet, or was it, just because it was male, females together?
When it was raining, yeah, maybe. We weren't there at night to know if they called at night, that's a good question. But when it was raining, they definitely got a little quieter.
That's evidence that they were quiet.
Okay, yeah, sure. Oh, and then the fun of the, staying in a small town like Bloomington, we, for less than the price of a hotel, we got this really cool B&B.
That's super awesome. It was
Very
just
awesome.
Black
It's called Black Beauty, and it was super fun. That just added to the trip. Yeah. Yeah.
Cicadas
Well,
for breakfast.
thank you guys, we'll stick around for a minute. Okay. So thank you. That was a fascinating presentation. For a lot of it, I was like on the fence, and then I was the Palooza, and then I heard the thing, and no, it's exciting, and I'm gonna go home and tell Rob that we need to do the New Zealand road trip.
Yeah.
And because, yeah, that was fascinating, so thank you very much. The research was incredible, and the slides and the videos, so I'm glad they worked, because that was fascinating. And so, yeah, thanks everybody for coming out tonight. I think we'll be around for a few minutes if you want to learn more about the club, or if you have any other questions, eat more of the cookies. And yeah, we have a few minutes that we can hang out. I hope everybody has a lovely holiday, and that you're able to get some good R&R and whatever you do over the holidays. And I look forward to seeing everybody in January. Okay, thanks everybody.